Welcome to the Yoga for Health podcast. I'm Paul Fox.
And I'm Heather Mason. And today we're going to be talking about the doctor will see you less often.
What we're all about at the Yeehaw charity is enabling as many people as possible to integrate the mental, physical, and social benefits of yoga into their daily self care.
And those benefits will not only help patients to live healthier and happier lives, but also we hope ease pressures on healthcare systems through fewer appointments, treatments, and prescriptions for drugs. This is prevention, also known these days as prehabilitation, and it's a top priority for the NHS and for us at EHA.
That's why we have such a strong focus on bringing yoga into what we call in the UK primary care, the local community setting which people turn to first when they feel unwell.
In the UK, family doctors are called GPs or general practitioners because they are the first port of call and can treat people for a wide range of ailments, or they can refer them on to a specialist or to a hospital as needed.
Joining us today is London-based GP and yoga teacher Dr. Chang Sun Park, who's an advocate for lifestyle medicine and also sits as a trustee on the board of the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance charity.
So, welcome, Chang. It's so lovely to see you here and have you on the podcast. I want to start by asking you how you first got into yoga. And obviously, we first met you at the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance because you opted to do the training with us. So maybe you could start with your journey and also talk about why you moved in that direction.
Thank you, Paul and Heather, very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. To answer your question, my journey into yoga was not terribly exciting. I, like many people, found yoga at the gym. And I went to the gym. Actually, it did coincide a little bit with my postgraduate training. So I was a junior doctor at the time, a few years out of graduation, and I was starting my GP training. And I went to the gym not because I had a good relationship with my health. I was pretty unhealthy, like many junior doctors. It was more sort of to punish myself and out of obligation. But what happened at the gym was after a spinning class, there was a yoga class right next door. A friend and I thought, okay, well, why don't we go and cool down and warm down and go to the yoga class? And soon enough, what happened was that I started feeling like I wanted to go to the gym for yoga rather than the spinning. And the spinning actually tailed off, and I just continued doing the yoga. And I just got hooked onto it, like so many people do. I just practiced consistently alongside my work. And curiously enough, I think both my work as a GP and having this practice yoga sort of fed into each other inextricably in some way and started to inform each other. And a few years later, I was lucky enough to do a teacher training. A friend of mine just suggested it and said, like, come on, let's do it together. And I'm so glad I did, because it was one of the best things I ever did. It changed my life, really, truly, and has informed the way I practice medicine and taken me into this new path of teaching yoga and also being a GP. And of course, I found you, the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, right up my street, because when you practice yoga, you realize for yourself just how amazing it can be, not just on a physical level, psychologically, but once you experience these things, as a GP, I thought, wow, this is really relevant. This is really relevant to healthcare. How can I make this alive in the way that I practice and also in healthcare? So that's
And Chang, did you get that feeling that it was going to support your health straight away? Did you need convincing? Did you have any concerns about, whether you've gone through a very evidence-based training? Could you see that the yoga could also meet a need more widely?
I didn't see my yoga as anything more than a personal physical practice initially. And it just turned into something more. I must say that when I started practicing consistently and had a bit more of an immersion and an understanding of what these practices were really designed to do, which is just to help us live healthier, happier, and understand ourselves as human beings, that context sort of changed everything for me. I have been through moments, certainly when I was doing my teacher training, learning about the history and the philosophy and the more esoteric side of yoga, there were moments where I thought, oh, is this really compatible with science, with my beliefs, and all of that? But I think actually, the more you understand about yoga, it is deeply compatible with modern life and very relevant. As relevant as it always has been, for human beings, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, and now.
Often we think that doctors want evidence bases, and they do, especially if they're going to refer it to their patients. But we find consistently that the biggest predictor that a health professional is going to suggest yoga to a patient or a client is their own lived practice. So what you say is really indicative of that. Right. So you did it, you felt it for yourself, you did the teacher training, and then later you were thinking about, okay, how can this work with my patients? So it's really important for people who want to be advocates, like we are at the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, to understand that health professionals do want the evidence, but the lived experience is really important. And you might offer a yoga class, for example, at a practice, or, invite your friend who's a doctor or nurse or whatever it is to come to your class if you're teaching, because it has a profound effect. And of course, we know health professionals are really stressed out throughout the world, and they can really benefit from it.
And so, Chang, did the yoga journey that you go on, did you start to feel that it began to influence the way you were practicing medicine as a general practitioner, or did you slowly integrate it? Did that raise any sort of worries for you? Because this is obviously a crucial relationship for us providing yoga services to build that partnership of trust with general practice, with the family doctors in the community.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer to that is, yeah, it has profoundly changed how I practice, quite honestly speaking. And I think that's for a few reasons. One is it's because it's profoundly changed me as a person. I'm more self-aware. I think I'm more patient, compassionate, less reactive, more resilient, all the things that my yoga practice gives me. So I think me as a practitioner, I think it helps me just every day as a practicing clinician. But secondly, it's changed my view on what health is, actually. Because as a professional learning medicine in the West, the way we interact with healthcare is very much at the sharp end. When someone is sick or something's gone wrong, and then you're there in an almost transactional sense, doctor, something's gone wrong, please help me fix it. And it's easy sort of to get tunnel visioned about that and think, right, I'm going to fix it and doing this X, Y, and Z. But looking at health in a multi-layered, truly holistic way, where you look at somebody not just for not just body and mind, which yoga deals with, but their whole self, their sense of self, their social connections, how they relate to people, their spiritual health, this kind of overview of someone. Really, we're very well placed to do this in general practice as a speciality. But even in general practice, we get very sort of tunnel visioned about, okay, what's wrong? We need to fix it in 10 minutes. So I think yoga just really gave me this, it sort of opened my view into what true holism was. And it's changed the way I consult completely. And actually, parallel to that, it sort of gave me a little bit of a through road into lifestyle medicine, which is this kind of sister. It feels like a very natural companion in the way to practice in clinical medicine. We can talk a bit about lifestyle medicine, but essentially, yoga is my lifestyle medicine. So I take all the principles that I've learned from yoga and try to bring it into practice.
If we can just stick with that, great little thought that you just presented there, and I can actually throw a question to my wonderful colleague here, Heather. Heather, even in 7 or 8 years that we've been working on the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, one of our early partners was Michael Dixon, wasn't it? And others at the College of Medicine and Integrated Health. And we've seen that view of medicine as a more holistic approach grow and change.
I think that there has been an increased recognition that has been growing for years that health is not just about treating symptoms, but even if it is, that it has to treat a comprehensive level of symptoms. I mean, that's where we have this biopsychosocial model that has emerged. It was talked about in 79 by Engel as really important. And I think that healthcare recognizes it and constantly seeks ways to respond to the whole person. And as far as I'm concerned, I know I'm biased, but as far as I'm concerned, yoga really meets that. We're talking not just about the postures or just about the breath. It also talks about values and behaviors and how to change behaviors and how to support the development of mental cultivation. So I wonder, you're talking on one side about addressing the needs of the person before they become completely sick, but also how you may perceive yoga as meeting the person at all angles.
Thank you. And of course, Chang, we're working at a time when the new National Health Service long-term plan here in the UK has just been come out and said prevention's got to be at the core of everything we do, because unless people look after themselves better, the whole healthcare system is under immense pressure, financial pressure. And so lifestyle medicine that you just mentioned becomes key to that. And there's also this call in that plan for the health service to become a health service and not a sickness service, as you just alluded to. So in a way, the kind of culture is shifting in the direction of yoga and other interventions, self-care interventions like ours.
I think so. I think the culture is shifting. I like to think now is the time for yoga to be fully integrated into healthcare. The health is everything that we are. It can't just be the physical body and the health of our body, and even mental health. Those things are important, but it's everything that we are. And I think this focus on prevention, it makes me optimistic if it's actually going to be actioned. If the long-term plan, if the money is going to be put where their mouth is, and actually the actions will follow to put prevention at the heart of things, then yeah, of course, we've always known prevention is better than cure, but actually, why has the focus not been there? I'm not sure. And lifestyle medicine really is, again, it's upstream working. It's looking at all the determinants of what the conditions that are necessary in somebody's diet, their physical activity, how well they sleep, how stressed they are. So the conditions of their life that work together positively or negatively to produce an outcome for health. So I think working on root causes, working upstream, targeting all the layers of who we are, I think these are all the things that yoga does so well. So yeah, I like to call it the ultimate lifestyle intervention. Is yoga.
That's great. And maybe Heather, you could talk a bit about why a biopsychosocial intervention is so effective at this level, and then maybe Chang, you could tell us what are the barriers, because a lot of people out there want to know, well, why isn't my GP recommending yoga at the moment?
We now recognize that health includes so many different factors. Of course, that is maintaining our health so we don't get sick in the first place, but it's also how we perceive our reality, because if we have negative views, that can affect our overall well-being and our mental health, how we eat and take care of ourselves, how we move, how we breathe, how we're able to work with our mind and reduce stress. And in the past, I think that this may have been less recognized in Western medicine, and it's really come to the fore. And we have seen, especially like with heart disease, for example, that's a core example with the work of Dean Ornish, that if you don't work on all of the aspects of the person, you can give them treatment, but then you will find them sick again from engaging in the same behaviors and thoughts, etc. What do you think about that?
I think this is a really important point, actually. And I think this is where yoga has the kicker, because lifestyle medicine, if you look at the pillars, diet, exercise, etc., you can look at them as separate components, as something positive that can be changed in someone's life. But nothing's going to change. We have the knowledge already. We've got lots of knowledge about what works. We've known about diet and exercise and stress, and you need to sleep well. We know about all these things, but the key aspect is behavior change. Is how you get from someone with all the knowledge. Even your GP has all the knowledge. Your GP will tell you, stop smoking, lose some weight. But how do we get that activation from that patient to change their behavior and also change it sustainably, so it's self-perpetuating? And I think this is the beauty of yoga, is that not only is it a practice, a physical practice for ease in the body, not only is a nervous system regulation practice, a resilience practice, what it does, I think, and this is what it did for me, above all, it's an awareness practice. I heard someone recently, it was a consultant psychiatrist who, like you, Heather, spent years in an ashram, so he's got sort of a bit of both worlds. And he said he used to think that behavior change was 50% awareness and 50% habit change. And now he's changed his mind. He says he thinks it's 90% awareness and 10% habit change. And I sort of really resonate with that, because yoga is a deeply introspective, quiet practice. The more you do, the more you are able to make good choices, self-regulate, and sustain healthy lifestyle, which is really what we want. We don't want people just to, do yoga for a week and leave it. So I think the big questions are how we get people hooked and how we get people to sustain themselves, because that picture of sustained healthy lifestyle looks different for every single person. So I think that there's a sort of magic piece about awareness in yoga, which is quite special, I think.
Massive focus, don't we, in the Yoga for Health program, on encouraging the people who come on, the service users, to develop their home practice. It's very inexpensive and scalable. And of course, with social prescribing pathway being there, we've really got a way of delivering this opportunity for them to change their habits. And just one other point on that, your point about awareness is really so pertinent, because without mentioning diet and what people are eating, we had this 14 centimeter average drop in waist between week 1 and week 10. And in the qualitative feedback from the 279 patients in West London who did the Yoga for Health program in the very first, the first round of courses, one of them said, well, there's no point doing yoga and then going home and eating 3 cakes and spaghetti bolognese. So it was almost like it induces a natural shift in behavior that's deep rooted.
Yeah, and I think in conjunction with that, yoga brings us directly in contact with ourselves. And we would think that we're always in contact with ourselves, but we're often in our minds thinking about the future. And when you're there in a posture and you're breathing, you really start to feel your body. Sometimes that can be difficult in the first instance. We talk about people getting hooked on yoga, and I think it's really important that we also give them a nice class where they enjoy it and they feel some ease, because they may think, I like that. I want to come back. But that quality of sensing into your body changes things, because then you actually realize how exhausted you are in the morning because you stayed up till 12 o'clock at night to watch Netflix, or you really love that chocolate cake, but actually it makes you spike and really anxious. And so you decide, well, I want it, but I want to feel better more. I think, that awareness piece being 90%, it really speaks to me, Chang, what you've said, because when you feel what it's really like to be you, then you want to be you in the best way possible, I think. And that's something that is so great about yoga, is it feeds itself. I wonder if when you refer or recommend patients to do yoga, what they tell you, about how it's changing their lives. And if they do say that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's one of my favorite. Probably one of the big reasons why I teach yoga is the feedback. It's not me, of course. It's the yoga, and the yoga, it has this sort of intangible way of affecting people. I mean, I teach in a very physical way. Postures mainly, a bit of breathing, a lot of postures. But interestingly, the feedback that I get is nothing to do with the postures. It's feedback like, I feel like myself again. I feel like I'm coming home to something. I feel grounded. I feel taller. Like these things that are bigger than a posture, and are residues of the yoga that sustain beyond the mat. And this is really what it's all about. We want the skills of yoga to bleed into people's lives so that they have self-sustaining healthy behaviors. So that's the sort of feedback that is incredible. So yeah, I'm glad that sort of 90% awareness thing resonated with you, Heather, because it really did with me. For a long time, even practicing lifestyle medicine and thinking about lifestyle medicine, I was very focused on, okay, well, we've got to focus on the diet, we've got to focus on the sleep, we've got to fix X, Y, and Z. And actually, what I have come to understand is that if you allow people the conditions to build their own awareness, to trust them, to know in which direction to move, and give them that space and time and those tools to listen to themselves, to become embodied, to not be distracted, which is so easy to be these days, then we are creating the conditions through something like yoga that allows people to be healthy. I really believe that.
I love breathing, and I have a background in respiratory physiology. And I'm one of those people that walks around and sees people smoking and thinks, how can I tell them to quit? Even though they're a complete stranger. And I have had people come into my yoga classes who are big smokers and say, listen, I am going to continue doing this, but I still want to do yoga. And then come back, a few months later and say, actually, I love my breath. I've decided to give it up. And it's that natural shift that happens when you really sense into your body. And also, yoga promotes discipline, And when we're talking about prevention, Paul, and I know that you really want to get into that in the long-term plan, when you start to gain that benefit from yoga and do it more and have more and more discipline, you do change your habits with greater ease.
Yeah, and I wanted to maybe tackle that if Chang could do this through almost asking a question on behalf of the 600 plus yoga for health teachers that we've trained, who still encounter quite a lot of resistance and difficulty in getting programs running and developing the kind of partnership with their local GP, surgery, and family doctors that they need. And my own personal view from my own experience is that the service is under such a lot of pressure as lots of healthcare systems are, and therefore there's a bit of a narrow bandwidth of attention there amongst the doctors, even though their working environment has been so greatly enriched by the employment of social prescribing link workers who are there now to take that 1 in 5 patients who come through the door didn't really have a medical problem. They need more of a social prescription to tackle that, and the health coaches. So I feel like we're getting there, but the process of change is very slow. So how can we make prevention really, really happen at that practical level?
Oh gosh, Paul, that's a really difficult question to answer because, yeah, we are under the cosh, and GPs only have a certain amount of bandwidth to take in all the different things that are out there. The easier we can make it for GPs to recommend yoga and send people to recognize safe programs, the better. So something like the Yoga for Health program is incredible because, to speak to the earlier question you asked, which is, what are the barriers? What are the resistances out there? Well, I think, interestingly, I was thinking about this, and actually, I think if doctors were given the time and the choice and said, well, what do you want for your patients? They would be fully on board. They say, well, if there's money and time, absolutely. I want my patients to have something amazing that's going to shift their lifestyle and self-agency and everything. So I think it's not an ideological resistance. I think doctors are fully on board and they have an appetite for holistic care and things that can help their patients. That, ideologically, I think GPs agree with social prescribing. Health starts in the community, not in the doctor's office. So I think it's not internal resistance from that point of view. It's more kind of systemic or structural. And also, I guess there's another big topic about resistance in that the word yoga itself has historically lay in sort of either gyms or the hippie movement or spirituality and religion. People have all sorts of ideas and presumptions about yoga, and maybe that still needs a bit of breaking down. But I think actually if you take yoga and contextualize it and describe the benefits in terms that clinicians can really take on board, and that includes evidence, and money saving and all the things that we care about in the NHS, then really you can't really argue very well against its value. I mean, who would argue against wanting a population that has self-sustaining positive lifestyle behaviors, can regulate themselves, are more resilient, can manage their stress, are more self-aware? You can't really argue against the benefits of it.
And, Chang, that has very much been my experience. I know I live in sort of a world of rose-colored glasses. I don't know how, but I almost never meet a doctor that says, no, I think that yoga is a bad idea. And yoga encapsulates things that are recommended by the NHS, like exercise and breathing techniques and these kinds of things. And so I think, as you said, it's really making it possible for doctors to be able to first conceptualize how it can be something that they can recommend and how they can do it. And I would love to hear from you some of the insights around that.
Actually, let's start with the Yoga for Health program, because for me, this is a program that allows yoga to be delivered in a way that is accessible to everybody. I mean, we talk about barriers. People think that they can only do yoga if they go to the gym, if they're thin and young and a woman, and possibly with no health condition. So something like the Yoga for Health course, which has been designed and delivered in a way that's fully accessible and particularly designed for people who may have health condition, is incredible because it's for them, first of all, and then in a way that incorporates so much of what we've already spoken about, which is social connection with other people in its delivery, accountability and consistency, regular practice with resources and homework, physical practice, because yoga is, you have to do it at the end of the day. So it's built in a way that encourages you to practice. Yeah, it just has so many components. Breath at its core. So often the feedback that we get back from the Yoga for Health program is how valuable the breath practices are. So for many reasons, as a GP, if I look at that course, I think, okay, it's been researched, number one, it's been tested, there's good feedback, it's safe, I trust the person delivering it. Okay, yeah, if it's available, I'm going to send a patient that way. The problem is, and I will put my hand up to this, I don't advise yoga to all of my patients. I wish I could, but I can't because there is so much variety. I have no idea where my patient is going to go and what kind of yoga they're going to have. So whilst I'm not a massive fan of standardizing things into sort of categories, I think what we have is the best solution for now, which is standardizing a program that is evidence-based, works very well, is broadly applicable for multiple people, ages, groups, health conditions. And then we make it possible, we make it accessible, we make it available. I know that I've got a connection with Yeehaw, the charity, and I believe in that program. I think it's a really great first point of access for people who've never done yoga before. And the other big piece to say about this is inequality, because if I have money and I go to the gym, I can go to yoga. But the thing that we're missing here is that yoga can help people. The people that yoga could help the most are the people who have least access to it. And so a program like Yoga for Health is necessary. It's needed.
I think that was a lovely description of all the sort of qualities that make the Yoga for Health program work, and thank you for that. I think the inequalities issue and yoga for a social purpose is also right at the heart of our mission as a charity. And although I think it's a separate podcast where we really look at that in detail, as you know, we've been delivering to them in the most deprived areas of Greater Manchester with grants from Sport England and the National Lottery. And that's been an outstanding success, really by holding the classes in very, very familiar community facilities that are known to the users who live in those areas, rather than we didn't hold any courses in yoga studios. And secondly, by using those trusted sources and connecting with the right people to publicize it, over half the people who came on those programs, and we're up to about 450 patients have done that program. Over half of them live in a household with an income before tax of less than 15,000. So we really have hit the target group there. And I'm sure it's well, we know it's made a big difference. And when the final evaluation comes out, it will be very, very impactful, I'm sure.
And Paul, I just really want to take my hat off to you because you made that possible. And it is exceptional. And it makes me emotional as well because, yoga changed my life and I had the ability to access it. And so many people don't. And I know that all of us here really, really care about humanity in general and to make it accessible in a place like Manchester where you're talking about deprivation. It's excellent. And I know you didn't do it in a silo, but you really led that action. And to Chang's point, it's interesting because basically what you I heard you say is we just need to trust the program we're referring people to. That's it. That's the nuts and bolts of it because everything else is there. And that's pretty awesome that you didn't say, well, you need to tell them this and you need to tell them that and you need to, it's just create something that they feel confident in referring people to.
Doctors can be confident that they're getting a good product here for their patient. It's safe and it's likely to have some kind of positive impact on a patient who engages in the program. So I think that's as much as you can ask for. I think maybe it's a slow road and the funding streams are a bit slower than we'd like, but again, hopefully it's a sort of self-perpetuating cycle where the more positive feedback we get, and I know that there's research happening on the Yoga for NHS program, which is running in parallel too. We haven't really talked about the evidence piece because, of course, as doctors, we want evidence, we want research, we want hard figures, we want meta-analysis, and they are there, they're growing. So, that could be another angle that we approach, the introduction into healthcare. But quite frankly, I mean, we can go into lots of different angles, but I think actually allowing people to experience yoga is the key, including staff, of course.
Thanks, Chang. And as we're doing a little bit of a mutual love-in at this point, I've got to say, the Yoga for Health program, whenever I look at it and reflect on it, it really is a pearl. And Heather, you were so instrumental in creating that. So thank you for creating something that has been such a joy to teach and spread the word about. At this point, we're going to take a little break. We're going to speak to Chang a little bit more in a moment, but we've got a new feature for the podcast, which is Heather's Science Spot, where she's going to share just a little nugget or two from the research that she's been looking into. And if you've heard about Heather before, she's absolutely obsessed with the research and the evidence. She's a self-confessed science nerd, basically. So she's going to share something with us now.
So I think actually what I'd like to talk about is research that is often seen as the most apropos to share with GPs and to share with doctors in general. So there is a psychiatrist slash neurologist named Dr. Chris Streeter who was interested in whether or not yoga was able to increase the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. So essentially, the messaging signal in the brain that allows inhibition, and inhibition specifically, she was looking into of fear circuits and pain circuits, etc. And she was interested in this because there is a subset of patients that she saw benefited from yoga, and those subset of patients had conditions where offering medications that increase levels of this neurotransmitter would be part of the recommendation, right? So things that would increase GABA. And a lot of things that increase GABA are not great long-term solutions in medicine. So in 2010, she did her first study and she found that a yoga class statistically significantly increased GABA. And she was doing brain scans on the individuals, and the research was really rigorous. And then somebody said to her, well, we don't have a control group. Maybe if you just exercise at all, you'll be able to increase levels of GABA. And she took up the challenge quite seriously. So she was then lecturing and part of the Boston University School of Medicine. And so she had two groups in her next study, one who was doing walking in a gym at the medical school and one that was doing yoga. Both groups were silent, and she chose a level of walking that reached the same level of activity and therefore like metabolic rate creating of energy that the yoga did. And that's so like for like, which is not that common when you're going to conduct a trial because you often don't find that much difference. And in fact, it was again statistically significantly better at increasing levels of GABA. And she's continued to do a series of other studies consistently showing that yoga increases GABA. And this is relevant for people who have anxiety, post traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain, and epilepsy. And I suggest that anybody who wants to convince a medical professional of the value of yoga shares these studies because they are rigorous. And also, the health professionals that I teach always say these are our favorite. And for individuals that just really want to see what yoga is capable of doing and shifting, they should also look into the research. And finally, long-term practice of yoga while you're constantly increasing the release of GABA actually changes neural pathways. And that is part of what gives rise to a shift in how we perceive ourselves, the level of discipline, the overall sense of how we want to live our lives. So, yeah, thank you, Chris Streeter. You've done amazing work. And yeah, it's super cool to know that we can increase GABA levels through yoga at quite a high extent.
Let's hope Chris Streeter is one of our listeners. Maybe she will be after this episode. So, Gabba good. Thanks, Heather. We're going to move on to our final segment now. So, nearly 1,000 healthcare staff have registered on the Yoga for NHS Staff Wellbeing Programme, and they get 6 weeks of live classes to equip them with a personalised yoga toolkit of practices to manage stress and promote health and well-being, and hopefully mitigate the risks of burnout, which are very real for them.
The pressures on the NHS and other publicly funded healthcare systems around the world is well known, as is the severe problem of staff burnout.
The latest data from NHS England shows that the sickness absence rate was 4.9% in June 2025, with anxiety, stress, depression, and other psychiatric disorders being the reason why 30% of staff were off work. And that means that 626,800 full-time equivalent days were lost due to staff being off sick for these reasons.
And Chang, what is your view about the pressure on the NHS and how yoga might actually help this?
I think it's not difficult to see the pressure that NHS staff are under. It feels unprecedented. I mean, I've been in clinical practice for 20 years now, and I thought it was just me. I was asking people, is this the worst it's been? Like, everyone feels so demoralized, burnt out. People are leaving. Doctors have always had a historically high rates of suicide, divorce, all sorts of issues in their lives. And so the stress and pressure on people is not small. And so I think anything that we can do to support staff well-being is much needed. It should be a priority. In fact, alongside the NHS long-term plan, there is also the workforce plan. I think this came out in 2023. And that cited that we need cultural change, we need flexibility, we need staff well-being programs to be implemented. So I think yoga does have a place there. As we've already aforementioned, for many reasons, it can be helpful for personal regulation and resilience. But I think the wider picture is, for me, actually, I think the wider picture is just allowing staff to be human beings. It's something that has definitely, practicing yoga has shifted my perception, as Heather was saying, very much on what we're doing here, which is a very humanistic way of managing or dealing with or interacting with people. And people include staff and colleagues. And I really think that a healthy workforce leads to a healthy patient population too. I really think that. I think it's as important to look after your staff as it is to concern ourselves with patients. So the fact that we have this parallel program, Yoga for NHS, I think this was a natural program that came about because we recognize this, and we also recognize the fact that for yoga to take root, people have to have an embodied understanding of what it can do for them. And I've seen over my 20 years so much unhealthiness in my colleagues and myself, so much lack of awareness of what it feels like to actually be healthy and sustain a happy, healthy, balanced life and a career in medicine. You'd think that it was impossible, but it's not. So I think to have an embodied experience of that and to give someone that, even that possibility of that experience in their body, is priceless. And if I could do that for one colleague, 10, 15, that would be incredible. So it's part of why I'm so passionate about, getting more healthcare professionals doing yoga.
As you know, we always make sure that the Yoga for NHS staff wellbeing program is free to the staff themselves. But it's still incredibly difficult to get NHS trusts and hospitals and separate different organisations, because the National Health Service is a lot of separate businesses all under under that one umbrella. They're very reluctant to put aside money for staff wellbeing, even though they have this terrible problem, because they feel kind of moral obligation to spend all the money on patient care. So that's another obstacle to overcome. And if we can just bring in the medical schools, which I know both of you have got things to say about, the problem starts there, doesn't it, really? Because there's such a lot of pressure on medical students, and then that pressure seems to continue and may even get worse once they are fully trained and take up roles in the health service.
You know, in relationship to that, years ago, I think maybe 15 years ago, because I've always been interested in getting yoga into healthcare, I spoke to Dr. Satbir Khalsa, who is widely regarded as the most well-respected yoga researcher in the world. And he said, you need to get yoga into medical schools, specifically talking about the research. And I was able in 2011 to 2014 to do that, to offer an elective at the Boston University School of Medicine. And my focus at that time was convincing the future doctors of the evidence base. That's really what I wanted to do. And I thought if they know this, they'll definitely be prescribing it. But at the end, we had a discussion about how the class had affected them. And almost every one of them reported that it changed their ability to manage the pressures of medical school. I didn't even realize that. And some of them actually cried. I remember somebody said, medical school feels like I'm an orange that has been squeezed out completely and I have no juice left. And yoga is giving that back to me. So I think that its introduction into medical school, both from the academic perspective and the lived piece, is so important. And if it is inserted therein, it just becomes part of what healthcare recognizes as crucial for patients, but also that doctors are doing for themselves and other health professionals. And I know, Chang, that this is something that you also really care about and we have talked about before. And I wonder, your positions and where you are with that and moving in that direction.
Not only would giving medical students access to this kind of information and practice be good in the sense that, we're getting more health professionals having that experience of yoga, but we're talking really prevention again. We're going really early. It's early intervention, because I came to yoga in my 30s, and by that time I had, 10, 15 years of really bad health and not looking after myself and not really understanding what I needed to do as a health professional to look after myself. So if we're able to give some more of those tools to young doctors, what I would really love is this becomes base curriculum. This becomes obligatory practice for all junior doctors, medical students, to understand that this is a non-negotiable. This is not optional. Your health matters for the sustainability of not only your career, but also for patient care. Yeah, because this will impact retention, staff sickness, staff morale, their effectiveness at work. So this becomes a financial issue as well, and a problem that the NHS need to worry about, because all I see at the moment is this deterioration of staff well-being. So yeah, I feel really passionate about this. I'm in talks with various people about getting a similar program that you delivered, Heather, in the USA into the UK. So let's see how we get on with that. But again, I think it's a no-brainer. I think doctors are screaming out for it. I think actually as doctors, people who really just want to help people and like people and want to do good by people are feeling actually the moral injury of not being able to do that in the way that they want.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much, Chang, for coming on and being a great guest in episode 2 of the Yoga for Health podcast.
It's been amazing having you and listening to everything that you've had to say. Thank you, Chang.
Thanks, everyone. We'll
Thanks.
see you next time.